guys.
I have to go.
Hi, Adam. Hello.
Hello.
How are you, Christine?
Oh, good, thank you. I was hoping Patrick would come and sit in, but he's decided not to.
Oh, well, fair enough. I'd decide not to too if I had a chance. I've got such a bad headache.
Yeah.
I don't know where Olya is. I'm hoping she'll join us sometime soon. Sorry, I've just got answering emails at the same time. Oh, here comes Olya. Cool. Good morning. Good afternoon, Olya.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Excellent. Just waiting for a few more people. Oh, we've still got 3 minutes, so
Cool.
I'll just keep adding people as they come along.
Awesome.
Oh, here we go. How's your day been?
It's good. It's been
Yeah.
a good one.
Oh,
Yeah.
has
What
it?
about you?
Okay. Have you ever done any work with Dr. Chris Tower?
No, whereabouts are they?
Oh, she's a registered psych nurse, and she's done she's got a PhD in mental health, and she takes a lot of courses down here. And I just did one with her today about learning about challenging behaviour.
Yeah.
It was
Cool.
really, really good. She's a very excellent presenter.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
she used to be Auckland based. I think she's in Australia now. I just thought you might have come across her in your many studies.
No.
No. Sorry, they're still joining up, so
Cool.
oh, come on, people. Oh, they're coming in thick and fast now, which is good.
Awesome.
Oh. If what's these? Sorry. Let's get rid of that. Did that work, Adam?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Cool. Yeah, I can hear you.
Lovely. How y'all doing?
It's a trick for new players with that pushing F4. I learned that after my first Zoom session too. Okay, we'll give them another minute. And then I'll do a wee introduction, Olya, if that's all right with you.
Good.
Where's Olya gone? Oh, she's over there. Hello. How's everyone's day been anyway?
Yep.
Busy.
Thumbs up. Good. Oh well, yeah, first week back after school, isn't it?
Mm.
Okay.
Love the hairdo, Robin.
Thanks. It's very I had my glasses on before, so it pushed all my hair up, so it's all spiky looking.
Loving it. Love it.
Yeah. I call it the just got out of bed look.
I was going for more the pull through the bush look.
Hey now, you would though, you're cheeky. Can you mute him, please, Hayley?
Yeah. I wish it was that easy.
I know, wouldn't it be lovely? No, I'm kidding. Love you, man. Oh, Rosalind, okay, so we've got 7:30, so we might just kick on. Where's Olya gone? She's still there. So yes, Olya is our feature speaker for tonight. I met Olya, was it 5 years ago now, was it?
Yeah, I think so.
Professor Woods. So Professor Woods is kind of renowned as kind of the guru behind CBIT. He is I think he's a doctor of psychiatry, is a psychology over in the States, and he came up with sort of reverse therapy, and then sort of studied that a bit more in depth on how it could help people specifically with tics. And what's that hospital called? Starship. The Starship Foundation brought him out to New Zealand 5 years ago, and introduced some of the DHBs in Auckland to send staff along. And at the time, Olya was working with one of the DHBs, and I think I met you. It also came to your workplace, didn't I?
Yeah.
Had a bit of a chat to some of the staff there, so I can vouch for Olya's expertise, and the feedback we've had from our families that have gone and sought help from Olya has been really awesome. So we get great feedback from our families, which is really nice to hear. So yeah, so I'll hand over to Olya. She can chat for sort of 40 minutes or so, and then we can ask some questions afterwards.
Cool. Thanks, Robin.
Sound all right?
Yeah. So hi everyone. My name's Olya, anywhere kind of in the middle. My family's Ukrainian, so the name's kind of from that side of the world as well. I'm a child and family psychologist predominantly, and as Robin said, I was working over at one of the DHBs here in Auckland when Dr. Woods came in, and I was fortunate enough to actually be able to attend one of his talks. And for me, that was kind of the start of the journey with tics and Tourette's. But initially, it was purely because it wasn't something that was covered overly a lot in psychology trainings. You know, when you think about it, there's a lot to cover, and there's certain areas to focus it a little bit more on. And tics and Tourette's might come down to one lecture here or there, and it's not enough to be able to know what to do with a young person when you meet with them. So that was how I kind of got involved with that, and from then on, unfortunately, even though there was a whole bunch of people that did the training, not very many of us seem to actively be using CBIT that I'm aware of. I think in Auckland, I think there's only one or two of us, Robin. I think there's one person in Christchurch, and I'm not sure if there's too many people that are actually actively using and offering that.
No, I think it's Hillary, isn't it? Hillary who is the other person in Auckland who's for adults though, really, isn't it? It's Summit Psychology. So I think it's just yourself and Cherie down here in Christchurch, that I'm aware of.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a shame, I guess, because I think there was lots of people at the training, and a great opportunity. And it's actually one of the things that I really, really enjoy is working with kids with tics and Tourette's. And one of the reasons for that is because with CBIT, I get to be there to see the changes happen really, really quickly. If it works, if it's going to work for the young person, it works very rapidly, and it's just amazing to be able to do that. So what I was thinking for today was to have a little bit of a talk around just what CBIT is and how it might kind of apply to families in general, how I would go about putting that into place, because I guess my impression was that most people might be joining because they want to find out a little bit more about it, find out if it's for them or for their families. Would that kind of be all right? Is that what people are open for? Yep. Cool. So that's what I'll do, and I'll leave a little bit of time for questions at the end. But if there's anything that jumps out at you guys while I'm talking, please don't hesitate to let me know. We can do that. So I did put together a PowerPoint for myself so that I made sure I covered all of the right things. So I can maybe share, I was thinking I could maybe share my screen and do that if that works okay. Yeah. Okay, let me do that. So, oh, no, I can't do that. Oh, I think
Robin, I can't actually, sorry, I can't see the speaker. Does anyone know why?
Mute myself for a start. See if I can make you, I'm going to make you the host, okay?
Okay.
There you go. You should be able to do that now.
Ah, there we go. Yes, perfect. Can you guys see me now?
Yes.
Cool, awesome. Let me do the slideshow then, and we can kind of have a chat. So, there we go. I'm not going to spend too much time on what tics and Tourette's is, because I'm fairly certain you'd all know about that. But I mean, essentially, you need to go into CBIT knowing the basic facts that it's neurological, that it's not learned, but it very much is influenced by your environment and your surroundings, and that it's also influenced by things that happen beforehand, any antecedents, places, situations, people, all of that can trigger off tics, and there's certain consequences that tend to make it better or worse as well. So those are really the core components that CBIT is built on as well. Now, I thought I would go into just a little bit of some other treatments before I jump into behaviour therapy and the ones that are commonly used in New Zealand. I mean, medication's one side of it. I know I'm not a doctor, I'm a psychologist, but I work alongside plenty of psychiatrists, and the ones that do tend to be used the most often are clonidine, risperidone, olanzapine, quetiapine, and all the rest of them. The one relatively newer one that I've been hearing about in New Zealand is guanfacine, but my understanding is you need to jump through a lot of hoops in order to get that into the country. So that one is a lot harder, but that is available in other countries. Botox apparently is a thing, more for, my understanding is adults rather than young people, and it tends to work more for your simple tics that might be around like the eye blinking or neck or those kinds of things. It's very temporary, but it does the trick for those simple tics. And the other one that I'm aware of is deep brain stimulation, which is again more for adults, and that's a much more invasive kind of procedure that is more, I'm not even sure if how much New Zealand does of that side of it. I just thought I'd mention it for some other things. My area of expertise isn't any of these medical treatments. I work alongside doctors, but my aim is habit reversal training and behavioural therapy. And so what CBIT is very much based on habit reversal therapy, and that's been around for a really, really long time. It's been used for a lot of things, and tics is one of those. So I think about 30 years, it's got a lot of research back into it, and all the research shows a lot of improvements for it. And what the main components of habit reversal would be awareness training, competing responses, relaxation training, looking at any contingencies we need to watch out for, social support, and relapse prevention. And I'm kind of rushing through these because I'm going to go into them in a lot more detail about how it applies, but that's the core of it. And that's what dictated CBIT and how it came about. So Doug Woods was one of the key people involved in looking at a randomized control study around how effective is habit reversal therapy, particularly with Tourette's and with tics. And he did 2 parallel studies. One was with kids aged 9 to 17, and one was with children that were 16 and over and adults. And the results showed that it was significantly more effective than any kind of supportive therapy that they had at the time, to the extent that 87% of those who participated in it showed 6 months later that there was a lot more improvements that they had, and actually that the improvements were very similar to ones that were had on medication, and were very similar to clonidine alone or risperidone alone, purely just through using habit reversal therapy. So what they then did is they essentially manualized it. So what used to be a 30-year kind of program that had some core components to it, they put together into one nice concise manual, and they called it CBIT, Comprehensive Behavioural Intervention for Tics, and that's kind of how the ball started rolling. So that study was from 2010, I believe, so it's been around for a wee while now, and I think they're slowly getting more people on board with it. So that's kind of the how the CBIT came in. There's a lot of concerns that I hear from families about what might go wrong, or why the therapy might not work. And one of those, and this is kind of the myths kind of about it, that might prevent families from searching it out. And it might be about worrying that trying to suppress or stop the tics might make the kids tick more. It might be that if we focus on suppressing one of the tics, it might make another tic worse, or it might make another one come in its place, or that it might actually mean that you are so focused on suppressing the tics that you miss out on important information that's going on and you can't focus. If I think of kids that are at school, for example, if they're overly focused on what's happening with their schoolwork, they can't do both at the same time. They can't focus on the tics and study as well. And those are all really, really valid worries. And that would be absolutely the case if it was purely about suppressing and resisting the tics from coming in whatsoever. But that's kind of the difference between CBIT and tic suppression. It's not about learning how to suppress them and make them go away. It's learning how to manage them and how to deal with them as they come up. So the main goals for CBIT was that it is a joint therapy that we do together with the family, and that's very, very unique to each young person, because the triggers are going to be unique and the things that maintain it and keep it going are going to be different, let alone the tics themselves. It doesn't seem to matter if it's complex or simple tics. The only thing seems to be if the tics have been around for a particularly long time, it might take us a little bit longer to untangle them. If they're tied in with some other things going on, if there's a little bit more OCD or ADHD or anything else, then it might mean that we need to focus on a couple of different things, and it's not quite as straightforward as just pure tics that happen. I have seen one or two families for whom it's just the tics and there's nothing else going on, but the majority of families that I meet actually have a whole bunch of other stuff that they need support with alongside that too. This is one of the really core slides for me about how the tics do interact with their surroundings a lot. And we call this a functional analysis, where we have a look at the antecedents, the things that happen before the tics, and try and see, are there any patterns that seem to make them worse? And you all know probably what the patterns would be and what seems to set it off, and you either learn how to plan for them or prevent them. And that's what we try and do collaboratively as well. And then the consequences is they can be both negative and positive too. So in terms of the early things, the really common ones might be being upset or stressed out or anxious, watching TV, or being very relaxed, kind of the opposite sides of it, being alone or being surrounded by other people in social gatherings, stressful life events, talking about them. It's quite different for every child, but it's also often quite different for the different tics too. And so we need to figure them out individually as well. With the consequences, there's the good and the bad. So the consequences that can make tics worse would be the social reactions. And if you think about it, if it's a tic that makes people laugh, then the social reaction, the peer attention, that's probably gonna keep it happening a lot more. At the same time, if it's a tic that means that people pay a lot of attention to it, same thing's going to happen. The kids are going to get self-conscious about it happening, and it's not going to be as effective for them. Or if you can get out of an aversive situation. So the example I often give is someone that might be sitting inside a quiet classroom, and there's a test going on, and there's some loud vocal tics that are happening, and your very well-meaning teacher will say, don't worry, you don't have to do the work, why don't you have a break? short term is great, provides a bit of a relief for the ticks, but long term, every time they're back in their classroom, they're back in that similar situation, the likelihood is that they're going to just tick again, and the same loop is kind of set up. And the other really big consequence that means that tics can happen more is that premonitory urge. And that's kind of the feeling that a lot of people have with tics, not everyone, not with every tic, but a lot of people have that urge or that build up or that sensation of discomfort, and then the tic makes it go away. The tic makes it feel like a relief. So that in itself, that feedback loop, can make it more likely that the tics happen again. So those are some of the things that we try and have a look at, and we try and replace it with the positive consequences. So we can try and make tics a little bit less frequent by focusing on the positive of gaining a bit of control of them by itself. If it means that the kids are getting teased a little bit less, or if they can do activities that their tics were getting in the way of for them, that makes a big difference too. And that is very reinforcing, and it means that it's probably less likely that the tics will kind of happen again. So the managing what is happening in the surroundings is a really, really big component to it. So we will always start off with looking at a functional assessment, at trying to figure out what it is that's happening in the environment, and trying to see, is there anything we can change? Is there anything that could be different? So one example would be, a child coming home from school, stressed out, anxious, goes into the lounge, sister's watching TV there, and there's a very loud vocal tic that happens to be quite annoying and gets in the way of watching TV. So of course his sister gets upset, probably tells him to be quiet, maybe teases him. Mum comes to her son's defense, sends the sister out of the room, and lets Billy watch TV on his own to kind of compose himself. Chances are, every time he comes home, there's going to be lots of tics, and especially when his sister is watching TV. And I don't know if that's a familiar story to anyone that's got more than one child, but the tics often can create that kind of a dynamic. So if we were to do a functional analysis in that situation, we'd look, the things that caused it would be that when he's stressed or anxious, it's worse, and then they happen more in the lounge or when he's watching TV. The consequences that keep it going is that he's left to watch the TV by himself. He gets a bit of time from mum, and his sister, who's teasing him, gets sent away. It's a win-win situation for Billy in this case. So what we might try and do for anxiety would be to look at relaxation strategies and help him manage that. And if the lounge is such a big trigger, or if after school is a big trigger, we might figure out, how do we change it? What can we do a little bit differently? So instead of the sister being sent in the room, she needs to stay there and apologize. Maybe mum doesn't comfort him anymore. And maybe instead of getting the TV to himself, the TV's turned off, and he's encouraged to practice the strategies for the tics in that situation. So that's just a very brief kind of example of how we might do a functional intervention. Any kind of questions about any of this stuff so far? I tend to talk quite fast sometimes. No? Cool. The other side of it is those urges that I was talking a little bit about earlier, and they're described very differently by different people, but a lot of people just report that the urges they're worse than the tics sometimes. That feeling in the build-up can be a lot worse, and it's very aversive, so it's better off to tic than to deal with that sensation, which ends up reinforcing the tic by itself. Oh, my pretty slide didn't come up. There it is. It's all individual. Sorry, guys. Essentially, the relationship is the urge will cause the tic. As soon as the tic happens, you get a little bit of a relief, and that itself reinforces the tics and make it happen a little bit more. So what we try and do is we try and cut it off right there, so that instead of the build-up of the urge, creating the tic, we try and put the blocker in it so that you don't have that urge to tic anymore, and so that there is no relief and you block the whole thing off. So that's kind of where CBIT comes in, is working on the sensation or the urge, if it comes up for the young people, and trying to figure out, can we habituate them? Can we get them used to tolerating that sensation until it passes? Because it does pass. It can stick around for a very long time, but it does eventually pass. And if we can get them to hold through and hold it out, and if they don't tic, then we break that feedback loop by itself. So that's kind of one component to the habit reversal. It's trying to disrupt that motor pattern after it's already started. We're trying to break the pattern, and the more we keep doing it, the easier it tends to get. But those first times tend to be quite hard and quite challenging. So the core parts of CBIT would be habit reversal, and some of the core things from there: the competing responses and working on the awareness. Function-based assessment is a really, really big part. And what they've also added on that makes the CBIT rather than habit reversal therapy, or HRT, is including a lot of psychoeducation and talking about tics and Tourette's, and making sure that everyone in the family has a really clear understanding about the fact that tics wax and wane, that's part of their nature, about the fact that they're not within the young person's control, and that sometimes ignoring it is the best thing, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page and you don't have one parent that's got one strategy and one that's got the other, but really bringing everyone together. Working on relaxation training, just because stress and anxiety is such a common trigger, that trying to make sure we have some stress management strategies in there is really, really key. And then relapse prevention, trying to figure out that if anything happens again, either we have a plan for how to cope with it, or we have a plan to return and have a booster session, which is really common. We might work together and figure out how to work on the current tics. And the aim of CBIT is to make sure so that the family is empowered to know what to do if there is a new tic that comes along, but sometimes they're just tricky, and it might be helpful to meet again and just problem solve it. And that's kind of how the later sessions are. It's more problem solving what to do with a particularly tricky one. And the last part of it is actually around motivation, because this is hard work. Working on tics is really, really hard work. And so sometimes we do need to build in a bit of a reward system, and to keep on focusing on why it is that the kids want to get rid of their tics, because it really does have to be annoying for them. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't recommend CBIT. If someone's not very bothered by their tics and isn't that fussed, it's not for them. The parents might be fussed, and we might be able to do some functional analysis stuff, but if the kids aren't bothered, we're better off just leaving it for now and seeing how they go. The structure is outlined to be at about 8 standard sessions and some boosters at about 60 to 90 minutes, and to have parents and children together. From my experience is that it has very rarely been 8 sessions. Some families benefit from 2 or 3 and they're away. Others need a lot more than 8, and it really does all depend on what kind of tics there are, how complex, and what else is happening for that young person. And that really does dictate it. I don't think I've ever done a 90-minute CBIT session. I think I've more done 60 to 30-minute sessions, purely because ADHD is such a common comorbidity that and I work with a lot of younger kids, that sometimes attention span wise, 30 minutes is just right. We might do another half an hour for the families, but I don't think I'd ever do a 90-minute actually. I think that might be a little bit too much of a challenge. But that's kind of how CBIT is recommended: 8 standard sessions, and then two booster sessions after that. the very first thing we do is we would create a symptom tracker. So we would make a list of every single tick that a young person has, and we would rate it on a scale of 0 to 10. And 10 is not a big deal, either doesn't happen at all, or hardly ever, or really doesn't bother you. And 10 is, this is the worst thing in the world, and I want it gone straight away. And every week we look at that list and see how they change. This gives us an idea of what the young person's patterns are. You guys might already know this as the family, what your child's patterns are, but I'm trying to figure that out as we go. So us having a look at this every week gives me a really good idea of how we're tracking. Is what we're doing working? Is this getting better? But also, is this someone for whom there's a new tick every single week? Or is this a person that's got their 5 ticks that they've had for the last 3 years, and that's what we're kind of sticking with? It's all very, very dependent. And what we tend to do is we actually start with the most annoying one, the one that really, really gets on your nerves. That's the one that we go with, because that's the one that we're most motivated about. That's usually the case. There have been some times where we've skipped around a little bit. Sometimes we might start with the most annoying one, and it might just be a little bit too hard or a little bit too overwhelming. But that's kind of the exception to the rule. Actually, what I find is most young people will want them gone, and if they do, they're pretty keen to see what they can do, and they don't want to work their way up to it. They want to start with that one, so that's where we start. As I said, the reward system is more about keeping that motivation going, and it's more for younger kids potentially than for adolescents. And it is just to make sure that for some people, it's about coming along to the sessions. They might need additional encouragement for that. It might be about joining in and actually talking and doing the work. It might be about doing the dreaded homework, because it's a lot of homework that you have to do with CBIT. It's not getting anywhere if we meet for an hour every week, and that's the one and only time that any work is done on the ticks. The work happens in the home, and how I often describe it to the kids is that I'm their coach, but they've got to put the practice in their homes for that to work, and just to generally kind of get them alongside it. So that's the behavioural reward stuff. The function-based intervention I've talked a lot about, but we try to work really collaboratively and try to get the kids really, really on board with figuring out their own patterns so that they can do it again in the future. So that if there is a new tick and they are trying to figure it out, they've got an idea of how they can go around it as well and try and figure out a plan. And usually the rule of thumb ones would be to try to see if we can minimize or get rid of any situations that might make it worse. Not always possible though. Try and get rid of anything that might be keeping it going or reinforcing it. Remind the young people that if they are about to go into a situation that's triggering, use the habit responses that we've talked about. Use your competing response. It might be about putting in relaxation strategies, teaching them some cognitive behavioural therapy strategies, and a lot of the work is sometimes about educating others around them about what is the best thing to do. I've worked with very many lovely and well-meaning teachers who just need a little bit of guidance. They really want to help, but they don't know what to do, so they try everything at once. And if you do just give them a nudge about what to do, it can make a really big difference. For parents, the main things that I'd probably focus on would be not reacting and ignoring as much as possible. Making sure that if you are frustrated with it, because you would be sometimes, is that any of that talk is without earshot, that the young people don't really need to hear it, and really focusing on the strengths, and not being the tick police, I think was the words that Doug Woods used, is again, it kind of fits in with the not reacting to them. Other one is don't let Tourette's or tics stand in the way. Don't allow it to lower the expectations of what you want from your kids or what other people should expect for them too. It's not an excuse. There's a lot of good stuff they should be able to do. Keeping them busy mentally, physically, getting the energy burnt off, having a really set bedtime routine and sleep is really, really key as well. So sometimes just some of those basic things in there can make a really, really big difference too. When we start on habit reversal, we tend to start off with awareness training, and that's very much about getting the kids or the young people to notice, do they know, what I'm usually looking for is, do they know that they're doing this tic? Do they know it every single time that it happens? Are they missing any of those occasions? Is there a build-up for them? Do they have that urge for that tic? What does it feel like? What does it look like? Does the tic change in situation? So those are all the things that we try and do. Sometimes it's done in session, depending if the tics are happening in session. That's the ideal, actually. If they can happen in front of me, then we can really try and nail it down there and then. But sometimes they don't. They might happen only in the home. So it might be about having some self-monitoring and learning how to keep track and pay attention to some of those things and noticing them. And so for that, it would be about maybe going half an hour, 3 or 4 days a week to keep track at times that you know that tic is likely to happen. And we just do it one tic at a time. It's not all the tics that are going on. It's just that most annoying one that we've decided to focus on, pay attention to it and keep track of it. And I often get parents to do it at the same time as well, because then we have something to compare it to. And a lot of the times there might be the parents notice twice as many, and then I know that the kids are missing about half of them. Or it might be vice versa. There might be some really subtle ones that the parents aren't noticing, but the kids are hyper aware of, that are happening a lot. So we do that side of it. We define the tic in as much detail as we can, and we try and figure out if we can define where it happens in the body, what it kind of feels like, describe all of the sensations that happen near any of those body signals, because that's the basis for us choosing our competing response. And a competing response is essentially an action or a behavior that you can do that is incompatible with the tic. It actually doesn't have to be incompatible with the tic. It can be anything at all, but humans are kind of logical creatures a lot of the time. So what they've found is if we choose a behavior that is physically incompatible, it seems to work the most or be the most effective for people. It's almost like we go, well, I can't do the tic if I do this, and something kind of clicks. But it actually doesn't need to be to do with that body, with that body part. So it might be, for example, if it's a head nod tic, it might be about keeping the neck quite straight or quite tense. If it's an arm or a hand movement tic, it might be about keeping it tense and close to your body. Anything kind of like that, we tend to develop it together. So we would tend to choose the response, try and do it together in session and practice it. And with the response, the incompatibility is one, but also trying to make sure that it's something that's less noticeable or doesn't interfere as much. And the most important one is something that you can do at any time, that it's not reliant on a prop where you're having a phone or something in your hand, that you don't have to be sitting down for it, that it's anywhere that it happens, you can do it there. And it also needs to be something that the person can do for at least a minute or until the urge goes away. And this is where it's so different for people, because sometimes the urge really doesn't go away for a long time. And I've sat an entire session with people who still report that urge has not gone away at the end of that 15 minutes. So it can be a really, really long time. And for others, it's a matter of 30 seconds or so. So it needs to be something that you can sustain and hold on to. I've mentioned some of those things. Oh, we tend to put it in, implement the competing response when the urge happens, not when the tick happens. That seems to be the most important thing. Is it's not as the tick is happening, it's as you can feel the signals coming up. That's the time to intervene, which is why that awareness part is really, really key. And then after a little while, what should happen is the pattern breaks. Because the urge is happening, but you're not doing the tick and you're not responding to it, the urge kind of wanes and the tick wanes itself, and then you don't need to do the competing response as much. So that's kind of the theory of how it tends to play out. Relaxation training that we include tends to mostly be deep breathing or diaphragmatic breathing and progressive muscle relaxation, which tends to be really, really useful because there's so much tension when you're dealing with tics, and there can be so much pain and so much tension being held in the body that progressively relaxing the muscles can be really useful. But those things are not competing responses. We don't use tension or diaphragmatic breathing as a competing response. It's just about stress management, really, and anxiety stuff. Social support is really key. Often it's someone within the family that's their go-to, and that's the person that's their cheerleader outside of therapy, that kind of keeps them going with the things that we've been talking about. And if there is a reward system in place, if we're dealing with a younger child, then they're the person that kind of keeps that going. And so it's all about encouragement, but it's about encouragement of effort, not success. And that's the other really key part, because the kids could be trying their absolute hardest and you might not be able to tell from what you see, but the effort is there. And that's what we want to focus on, is that they keep on putting in the effort, because a lot of the competing response work is trial and error. What we talked about in one session might not work, but something might click in the next one. So we just want to encourage people to keep on giving it a go. That's the most important part, to keep going until it clicks, really. And I know a lot of times people kind of finish up with things that, things to take away. I was going over some of Doug Wood's notes, and this is directly kind of from his slide, because I think it's a really useful thing about things not to take away from here. And it's that it works for everyone, because it doesn't. There was an 87% success rate, which is really, really high. But there's a proportion of people for whom behavior therapy doesn't work. We often don't know until we try. I would usually recommend giving it a go, but it hasn't been successful for everyone, and that's kind of a really hard one there. But sometimes it might be about trialing it with therapy and medication. Sometimes it might be about some underlying challenges, like if there's significant anxiety or depression, then doing habit reversal for tics isn't really going to go very far if we're not addressing the underlying things there. So CBIT isn't a cure for all. It's a really successful strategy, but it's not going to work for 100% of people, and it's not going to work every single time. The other thing is that sometimes people just don't need CBIT, and usually this would be if they're not bothered by it, if they're fine, if it's not getting in the way of their day-to-day life. I typically wouldn't recommend it. Sometimes younger kids, that's particularly the case. That being said, I have worked with some quite young kids, kind of 5 or 6 years old, and it works for them as well. It's just very, very modified what we do, but that's only if they're annoyed by it or bothered by it. Otherwise, I'd say leave it and wait until they come to you about it. One thing that people think, because it's termed as behavior therapy, it might give the impression that tics are learned or done intentionally, and they're not. that can be reinforced by the environment, that can make them worse, but that's not a conscious decision. It's not learned. It can be amended, but it's not a learned problem. Sometimes people worry that that rewarding the child for not having tics is good behavior therapy. We don't reward them for not having tics. That's not our goal. We are trying to get them to feel in control of their tics and to feel like they can manage them. It's not about don't tic, because then that means they just suppress and not try and just use CBIT when they need to. That's the big difference. Don't assume that the child's trying to annoy or frustrate or for attention. That just might be one of the triggers. And the other thing is that if they don't benefit from behavior therapy, it's often not laziness or effort or anything else on the part of the young person. It might just not be the right timing for them, and it might be worthwhile giving a go later on. Or it might just be that it's they're one of the people for whom we just need to look at a slightly more creative solution to try and make that happen. And that is CBIT in a nutshell, really. I feel like I've done an information dump. So I don't know if you guys have seen this cartoon actually by Mr. Fishley. I think he's really cool. So I'd love to hear any questions, any thoughts that you have. I might stop the share so I can see you all a little bit clearly again. Hello.
Hello.
Any thoughts, any questions that anyone has around CBIT?
Do you think there is an age, you did mention you've worked with 5 to 6 year olds. I mean, there is a lot of cognitive awareness and knowledge there. I mean, would you have sort of a recommended age? I often, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this to people, I often say, before the age of 8 or 9, they're not going to recognize that urge necessarily. They're not going to know that it's coming. Yeah.
That's often my recommendation too, is kind of from about 8 or 9 years. But I've just had a lot of success recently with younger kids, that when I do have families come to me with younger kids, I do often say, look, we can give it a go and see what happens. And it might literally just be 1 or 2 sessions, and then we stop at there. Because if I'm gauging that actually the kids are becoming self-conscious about that, because that's what a lot of families are worried about. If they're not that fussed about the tics, or if they're not that aware of it, should we even do that? But often I think there's benefit in the families understanding a little bit more about some of those functional things, some of the things that they might be able to change or amend, or just get a little bit more understanding. What I've also found is that you're right about the awareness and the cognitive side of it with the kids, but what's most fascinating to me is that it still works for them. And often all we do is that awareness. We actually just play the noticing game. And just playing the noticing game every day for a week, or maybe 5 days out of a week, will just get the kids to realize that they can do something about it. And we'll often see a decrease purely from the noticing, purely from the awareness. So we don't tend to get into the picking, the response and that side of it unless they're quite focused on it. It's just more them realizing that they can be more in control of it, and then we just leave it up there. I often only have 2 sessions or so with the younger kids, and then we pause and see how it goes.
And what about maybe for some of the older teenagers who are like 18, 19? I mean, I'm not picking on you, Adam, but obviously you're here. And like for adults that might have, I'm not going to say learned habits. I mean, can you alter sort of not a learned behaviour necessarily, but their way of managing their tics to I'm not going to say a better way, but do you know what I mean? I think.
I think so. I think the challenge with anyone that's, especially if they've had a particular tic that's been around for a while, that's that often makes it a lot harder, simply because that tick has been around for a long time and it's got a pretty well established neural pathway. It's got a way to go down and it knows what to expect. It is doable, it is, but it takes a lot of effort to do that. And again, it's often trial and error, because he'll keep on trying to come back to the way that things are, and trying to come back to the status quo. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking at the functional based, and for example, we've got a situation where we've got a couple of kids that have Tourette's, but one of our children in particular, when we try and sit at the dinner table, the lunch table, he just goes nuts. So I had been thinking that let's just take us away from the table. We'll just go sit in the lounge. What are the chances of getting him back to the table so that we can sit around the table as a family?
Yeah. Well, look, it might be that might be one of those ones to tease apart a little bit further. I mean, mealtimes are often quite stressful and busy and noisy for a lot of families. So I'd wonder what it is about mealtimes that makes it happen a little bit more. Is it any mealtime? Is it just dinner time? Is it only when the whole family together? I'd be wondering about those kinds of things.
Lunch and dinner. Lunch mainly.
Lunch, generally when we're all at the table together, and we try to just perhaps distract it by talking to the other kids or the younger ones about what their day's been like. So we do try to do distraction stuff. Sometimes, because he tends to stab himself in the stomach with things, we do find we have to remove all his cutlery and stuff. Which is a bit problematic for lunchtime, obviously, or dinner time. But yeah, we're trying to think of ways around it.
There'll probably be a bit of a planned approach, wouldn't it, of let's take the break from the table, but know that it's not the permanent kind of solution, and probably work towards trying to work on that particular tick at the dinner table that might be the most bothersome one, like if it's the cutlery one, and trying to figure out how to make it so that it's not such a big deal for the young person.
We had that tick for a time with the sharp objects, knives, forks, and yes, sitting. There's a video somewhere from when she was 9, and if she sit at the table, she'd start to convulse. We just ended up giving her the option. We said, well, do you want to just stand at the table then? And I think once she had that option where she could choose, all of a sudden she wasn't doing that tick anymore. It wasn't a learned, we weren't, training her into not doing it. I think the stress of sitting down but being allowed to stand up at the table, which we don't usually do. We don't usually eat at our table standing up, but her knowing that she could do it if she needed to, I think took the stress off the whole situation of it being a dining room table. And then after a short time, she could sit at the table again.
I must admit, we had guests, and I offered him the choice not to, if he wanted to go and sit in the lounge, and it's all open plan anyway. That he could do that rather than sit at the table with us.
Yeah.
Picked up by the mic.
I see some hands being raised. I don't know what to do with that on Zoom. Was it Adam? Yeah.
Adam, turn your microphone on. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I've just turned mic on. No, I just wanted to briefly say I chose to just join in this evening because I'm always fascinated on, anything like this. I just want to say definitely a lot of good points have been raised tonight. I think it's fascinating kind of hearing a lot that's been discussed, because I think I've self-taught a lot of this stuff. But, this is coming from someone who's 33. I've lived with it for long enough to do that as an adult and such. But, because I've got extreme tics, I don't think something like this could ever work for someone like me. But, for example, I might punch my head and somebody thinks, oh, well, that's extreme. For me, that's actually a shortcut from something much more extreme, if that makes any sense. But, it's very... it's very good stuff, and it's good stuff. Like you're talking about pointing sharp objects and that sort of thing. Something that stopped me from actually pricking my skull with metal forks was just converting to plastic cutlery, and just simply by changing to plastic cutlery as an example for a couple of months, it meant that it took the fear and anxiety away from stabbing my head, and in turn, relieving that anxiety and fear of doing something that you hate was enough to take the fear and the anxiety that kind of was the trigger.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah. So it's definitely, is there a problem? Yeah, and finding a way around it to just relieve the anxiety and the trigger. And that would just be one example. But yeah, I just want to say it's very fascinating stuff, and I think it's good. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, Adam. I work, like I said, I work with a lot of kids and young people, but young adults as well. And what I find for the young adults that might be, you know, in their 20s or early 20s or in their teens, they often have it. They've figured it out almost. They just haven't been able to identify that that's what they're doing. And I think often CBIT can then be helpful to make them go, that's why that works for me. And then if a new thing does come along, they're actually able to go, right, well, now I know the steps to take it, as opposed to, I think they find their way over the years of figuring it out and doing the self-taught thing. But it's a lot easier if you've got a little bit more of a guided map towards it, as opposed to really just having to wing it and see what happens, eh?
Absolutely. And another example where you spoke about the child watching TV and the sister bullying and that sort of thing, is a relation to that sort of, as an example, I'd find getting up in the morning and getting ready for bed is two of the most difficult parts of my day. So getting dressed is very difficult. So what I deliberately do is I deliberately, on purpose, change the routine of order. So instead of actually getting dressed necessarily the minute I get out of bed, I'll just walk around in my underpants, whatever, it's just me and my brother in the house. But deliberately changing that routine, again, it's a technique of relieving that anxiety and the triggers. It's almost like giving a game for the brain. It's like a game. It's something for it to change and sort of, it's that whole distraction thing. Yeah, it's just mixing it up. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. All right, that's all I've got to say.
That's awesome. Thanks, Adam. Come on, Kate, out of the way. Anyone else got any questions for Olya tonight?
No, I just want to say this has been really fascinating, mainly because Millie's on a waiting list, and we're looking, I think, hopefully within the next few weeks, she's going to be seeing someone for this therapy. So it's quite nice to have a to know what it's all about before we go in.
Oh, whereabouts is that?
Her case manager at Whanaki's organised it. Apparently there's someone there that started that does it. So
great.
Got her on a waiting list. So hopefully in about a month.
That's really good to know. Cool.
Yeah, so it'll be good.
Did you have a question, Emma?
Yep.
You might just, oh yeah, there you go.
Just with the competing responses, so if, for instance, he's doing one for flapping and maybe squeezes his hands instead or something, could that then trigger the urge for another tick quite strongly?
That's kind of one of the worries that people have, is if what we're doing, is it going to turn into another tick? And that has happened to me on occasion where we've been trying to do CBIT, and the thing that we're trying to focus on actually can, very rarely, it has almost turned into one. But often the goal is to try and make it so it's less noticeable. So even if it does turn into something else, if it's not as irritating or noticeable or annoying, then might be successful enough to work. But the other side of it is, often to me, if that does happen, if it might look like it's turning into something else, it's a sign to me that we haven't done a good enough job of looking at the underlying stresses that might be going on, or anything else that's happening in the context that might be keeping it going. So if if the flapping stops, but in that same context, what you see is a whole new tic that keeps happening again and again, then it's more about maybe the situation that might be stressful, and it might be about trying to figure out what can we do, or what's the least invasive tic then that we can look for in that kind of situation. So if there is a tic that happens, it's the least kind of annoying one. Does that kind of answer
yeah, I think it's sort of, yeah, because I guess if you're looking at one to kind of try and, I don't know whether suppress is the right word, but suppress, say, the flapping, but then he gets real strong urges to do head nodding or something like that instead.
Kind of transfers into the body.
Yeah, transfers from that tic to another tic altogether, completely one of his tics, but yeah, kind of.
That's really hard. That is really hard when that's that connection. Yeah, we try to, and we work on them one at a time, under the theory that if we can break the pattern and the loop that happens for one of them, then at least we can get rid of that one, and then we'll focus on the next one that might be triggering off for him after that, and keep on working our way down the list. I don't think I've very often gotten all the way down the list. I think quite often I just kind of get the feedback that this is good. We're okay. I'm in a good place now, and we kind of tend to stop there. But it is, yeah, it's hard when they travel actually from one to another for the kids, because it's very frustrating for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and just one other thing quickly, sorry, is we're not in Christchurch or Auckland or anything, so I've heard about Tic Helper website. Is that something that is quite good to do?
I was gonna mention that actually, both of those things. So the Tic Helper was developed by Doug Woods, who's the CBIT person. I haven't talked with anyone that's used it, so I can't comment on its usefulness. But I did want to bring up that initially, so I'm currently living in Auckland, and it was at Whirinaki that I was working when I did my training. I'm currently working in private practice at Young Mind Psychology, and I was trained down in Christchurch. But what I've found over this lockdown period, when we were all doing a lot more online therapy and Zoom and all the rest of it, and I was having to carry on with my clients, is I've actually found that online therapy seems to work really, really well for tics as well. I had some reservations about it personally, and I've kind of tended to recommend families try and go somewhere within closer to their cities, but knowing how few and far of us there are in between that aren't trained in CBIT, I have found it really useful. It's not a cure-all and be-all if there's a lot of those other underlying things going on. There often needs to be that face-to-face connection to get it to happen. But yeah, there's some families that I still work with online who are in different cities, and it seems to be quite effective for them as well. So that's an option I'd be more than happy to offer as well as virtual therapy to give it a go too.
Cool, thanks heaps.
Yeah.
Jackie had a question before. Jackie, you had your hand up anyway. Did you want to ask a question, Jackie?
Sorry guys, that was actually Claire.
Oh, okay.
Playing with my settings.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to say though, Adam, your bit about plastic utensils, that worked really well for us too.
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. This time last year was when everything was like a bombshell in our home, and plastic utensils worked fabulously.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, it's just knowing that you can go for your life and you're not going to hurt yourself.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's messed up, but it's the fear of it is enough to trigger it, and that's yeah.
We've just gone back to plastic forks this week. So they do. They wax away and they go away. They come back. They're bloody unpredictable.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, thank you very much. It's been really interesting. And Claire's actually been listening in on this talk as well too.
Love you. Love you more.
So thank you.
Awesome. No, very
Awesome.
Yeah. Any other kind of thoughts from anyone?
No?
I'm
Okay,
curious.
well then,
Are the talks still going to be carrying on, Robin? I know that the kind of started from lockdown. I've been recommending it to all the families that I'm seeing, and I just want to know
great.
is the peer support and the
Yep. So we're doing support, like chat groups, I suppose, for every age group now. So from 10 onwards, so 10 to 12, or intermediate school age, young teens, mid-teens, early adults, and then parents and adults. And then we're trying to do a workshop once a month. So next month, I'm hoping to get a lady in from AOK, which is talking about, which she deals with teaching parents how to approach how to talk about depression and suicide with their child, how to not be scared of it, and how to talk with them in a safe way, to encourage their children to then go to them if they are having issues, and not to make it so taboo, and what language to use to initiate that conversation. So that's hopefully our workshop for next month. So yes, if you've ever got any topic you'd like to share with us, Olya, you're most welcome to come back and talk anytime.
No, thank you. No, thanks for the opportunity. I just thought it is one of these things that needs a little bit more awareness of the CBIT, and I did just think post lockdown and post COVID, we did see a lot of stress with people going back to school, and now it's after school holidays again. I've just seen such positive results with the video sessions as well, that just because you don't have if there isn't someone that's CBIT trained that's available privately in your city, I'm more than happy to offer it. The other side of it I wanted to say is actually, if your child or young person is involved in the mental health service, even if they don't have a CBIT trained practitioner, I'd encourage you to ask them for a psychologist that's trained in habit reversal or behavior therapy, because most psychologists would have covered behavior therapy and most would have covered habit reversal. It's one of these things that we do as part of our training. CBIT is very specialized, and if you don't have a CBIT person, what it means is that your child might be the first person with tics they see. So it's going to be trial and error for everyone involved. That's, I guess, the benefit of the CBIT training, is it's very, very specific. But there is a manual for CBIT. It's not that expensive. DHBs are able to get it. The psychologist should be able to have a look at it. The key is about getting foot in the door with the TS diagnosis, and it also often needs to be more than Tourette's, and in order to get through the door, depending on the DHB. But if you're in there, I'd keep asking for behavioural therapy, for habit reversal therapy. That's what CBIT is based on. So it'll be good enough. It'll be better than nothing. Would be kind of my recommendation too. Yeah.
I can back that as well, Olya. I'm in Auckland, but Amber, we didn't have a CBIT trainer, but so much of what they did was what you're talking about, and she was pretty extreme to start with, and the speed that we saw improvement from I mean, Amber, as most of you know, can still be quite extreme sometimes, but the speed with which we saw change from people who were willing to try some of these, and they were experienced in habit reversal, and that was in the public system. It was, yeah, and thank you. I really, really enjoyed this.
Cool, awesome. I'm happy to help.
Yay. Awesome. Well, I guess on behalf of all of us, then I'll say a very big thank you. And I'll put up your contact details on our Facebook page tonight, and then people, if they want to, they can just get in touch with you. Is that cool?
Awesome. Thanks very much, guys. I really enjoyed having a chat, and yeah, I'll keep on recommending this to the families that I work with. I think it's going to be very useful to share the tips.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. And I will see some of you at camp very soon. It's coming around so quick. Like it's like now in 10 weeks, it's the end of this term. It's like, oh my God, but that's okay. And then, yeah, I'm up in, where am I up to next? Auckland, Tauranga and Hamilton next month. So I'll send out an email if you are in any of those places. Hopefully we can catch up. I'm up there for about a week, so I'll be flitting around backwards and forwards. So hopefully I'll get to catch up with some of you that I've seen on a screen but never met in person. Be lovely to see as many of you as we can catch up with. I might even come to see you too, or if you're free for lunch.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Actually, that would be a really good, nice idea. We should do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be in touch.
Cool.
Cool. All right, I'm going to go now and tend to my child. Whoopsies. So good night, everyone, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, guys.
All right. See y'all. Yeah. Whoopsies. Cancel that. Leave.